All right, guys, welcome back. I'm GenoJ, a real estate guru, and I got a special guest today with me, my good friend of mine, investor, coach, Frank Iglesias. So today, I'm here with Frank, and we're just going to be talking about real estate. I got some questions I want to ask him about this house. This is a modern house that we're in. I've never built a modern house. I've done some modern finishes. So I got some questions that I want to ask him about a modern house. And then we're just going to have a regular conversation about what's going on in the market. And so let's just get into it. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel. And definitely leave any comments because I answer all questions. Frank, just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in real estate and currently what you're doing.
Sure. So we've been at it now for 12 years, and we started small like everybody else, doing some buy, fix, and hold. Mm-hmm. Got into wholesaling. Always did a little bit of remodeling. Graduated into bigger projects. Did rehabs, then we got bid into new construction. Nowadays we play in all the spaces. Mm-hmm. So we still play with rentals, we still wholesale, we still flip, we're still building. We're probably heaviest in the new construction space still, but we do like those simple little fix and flips.
Gotcha. We all do, man.
We like those.
Yeah, I think you kind of need a little bit of everything to survive in this market. Yep. And you're a lot like me. I do some rentals, a little bit of wholesaling every now and then when I get my hands on stuff, some new construction and some fix and flips. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the market right now, man. I want to get your take on what do you think about the market. And then where do you think it's gonna be in maybe a year or two? What's your forecast on what's going on?
You know, the market's interesting. You have a lot of areas where there's hyper demand. Mm-hmm. I was looking at a thread on Facebook just yesterday where they were talking about, what was the most, I don't remember the exact question, but essentially, what was the most you put into an offer and still got outbid? And one person wrote something like $68,000 with no contingencies. And I responded, I'll sell any of my deals for $68,000, no bidding or required. Just call me.
I know, right?
So you've got some insanity going on out there on the buying side. But by the same token, there are some micro markets where things are not getting bid up like crazy. We're sitting in town Atlanta right now, and there's plenty of houses still here that will hit the open market, and mm-hmm. they'll sell for more or less close to list price. They're not getting overbid by $50,000 or anything like that. So I see a lot more of the insanity outside in the suburban than I see in the urban area. But I think we'll be strong this year. Mm-hmm. I don't have a crystal ball. I know a lot of people have been thinking, well, there's all these foreclosures backing up and that whole sort of thing. But if you think about it, and I'm certainly no economist, but the banks are borrowing money at next to nothing, because the Fed is at what, like 0% or something like that. So they're getting money, they're flush with cash, there's a lot of demand. So they're, unlike the last crash, they're in a position where they can hang on to inventory. And they can ride this thing out. As the COVID thing passes and more people get vaccinated, more people get out there and people start feeling normal, whatever that means anymore. A lot of people will be able to, catch up. Now, some of them may not catch up. Actually, we know some of them won't. But because the market's so strong, if they got to sell, they probably have equity. Yep. Worst case, they may have to come to the table a little bit. So there's a lot of strength there. Now there'll be some, of course, that will get foreclosed because it's just too far gone. Mm-hmm. But I have no crystal ball, but I anticipate we will ride through this and whatever crashes the market probably won't be what we got now.
And I kind of agree with you, man. And then the other factor is there are a lot of iBuyers out there, like Zillow and, Open Door, that are probably, some of the stuff might get packaged off and just sold in blocks.
Yeah. And
I saw that towards the end of the last recession, where a lot of stuff just started to get packaged and banks were just selling, portfolios off to a lot of hedge funds.
Well, if you think about the iBuyers, they didn't exist in the last
Nope.
crash. And they're out there buying today and they're paying premium prices. Mm-hmm. And when you think about all these different factors, it's very different. I tell people 3.5 years ago, we were sitting at one of these level up meetings, and most people in the room were, I don't want to say convinced, but feeling like, this bubble's going to end soon. It's been 3.5 years. And we've had a pandemic.
Yeah.
And it still hasn't. So what will finally stop it? I just don't know that we know. The Fed is printing money like it's, like paper, literally like any sheet of paper we buy to print at home. So it's really going to be interesting to see what causes this market to shift. But I wouldn't be surprised if what we see now continues through the end of this year and maybe into next year.
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
You don't have a crystal ball, no, but who knows? The next question I want to ask you is, let's talk a little bit about this house that we're in. It's a modern house. I've built a lot of houses. I know you've built a lot of homes. I've never built a true modern house. I've done a lot of modern finishes and touches. What is the big difference between building a modern house versus a traditional or craftsman style house that you found?
I think the number one difference is the one that you're only going to hear this answer probably from architects that have a lot of experience with modern or designers. And that's, to me, what I've learned is building modern, you're not really building a house, you're creating art. This is really art. And that's what I've really learned through building several now is when we approach it with the same approach that we would use during building like a craftsman house or a traditional home, A-frame, split level, whatever, ranch, pick your style.
Yeah.
There's a lot of continuity between those different styles where your finish level and the feel, they may look a little different, but there's a lot of similarity. You come into modern, it becomes much more artistic. And, the simplicity is what creates the difficulty, in my opinion.
Okay.
And so what I've learned, because we've made a bazillion mistakes with these moderns, but that's what we've really been learning. At the end of the day, it's like, hey, we can create straight walls in this, but the simpler it is, it actually increases the difficulty.
Okay.
It really does. I've really been learning this is really a niche. And I get it now. I didn't see it when I started, but now I see it. I'm like, this is really a niche where you really got to dive into what are you ultimately trying to create. Because it's not just a nice floor plan with spacious rooms. Because that we're good at.
Yeah.
I don't know if when you walk, you say everything's really tight.
Out nice.
But that's just a piece. And it's not just finish. There's nice finishes in this house, and we got the whole Euro style cabinet, blah blah blah. But it's really coming together with that unique set of elements. And so when I look at pictures of modern homes, I see them differently now. I'm like, why are people drawn to that? Like, why would somebody take this image and put it on a house.com or a Google? What is the emotion they're really trying to create with this? Because if you look at it from a nuts and bolts perspective, it's deceivingly simple. But even then, when you build it, you're like, this is not easy.
Yeah. So I take it, now that we're talking about it, it's going to be probably a different architect that probably specializes in just doing those plans. Would you kind of agree with that?
I would say it's a different everything.
Yeah.
Like just with the subs, for example. The subs that do modern, if they've never done it before, you're probably going to be training them on your dime because it's just different. It's a different thought. I can't tell you how many subcontractors that would walk in and they just do what they do, which is not bad, except what you do doesn't necessarily work. And we all know buyers buy emotion.
Yep.
But these moderns, they're different because, not everyone buys these things. I mean, half the people don't like them, quite frankly. So you got to be more specific because you've got a smaller buyer pool by default. And so it's been a real interesting experience. But so taking it back to the architect, that's really where it starts. So when we designed some of these, we worked with 2 different architects on our moderns.
Okay.
And what I learned was, at the end of the day, were they bad? No, they weren't bad. But what I learned with all my plans is they were just plans. But they didn't really bring the feel element into it. So what is a good modern architect? I'm not sure. I don't know that I've worked with one yet. I've met architects that do modern, but that's going to be my question for the next one I do.
Gotcha.
Is we're not going to talk about floor plans and stuff. We're going to talk about what are we really trying to create for that experience.
That makes sense.
I never thought I would sound like what I just described.
But no, I mean, it makes sense because it helps me think about stuff, because I mean, like we've come from a similar starting. Like we started from the bottom doing carpet and paint and built our way up. And I think about my project differently now. Like even the new builds, like everything, the thought process is different. And like everything, like certain things have to line up because sometimes buyers don't realize what they don't like. And just by having something off or awkward, it may throw a buyer off. So you have to put a lot of thought into the functionality and how that house flows, especially, the type of house that, you want it to be. So let's talk about some of the good, the bad, and ugly that happened with this house. So
Oh my goodness.
give me one painful story about this house. Like what was a real challenge for you with this project?
How many hours you got? That's like almost by a committee answer. What was a big challenge in this house? I'll go with this one because it was a challenge, but it became a blessing. So it was a series of mistakes actually turned into a positive. So at the end of the day, but it was challenging to get there. When this house was designed, it was actually a 3-level house.
Okay.
And there was going to be you would drive down into the garage right underneath the right side. And then you would have finished space down there. So it was a true 3 levels finished with, on more or less the same topography. I'm glad in some ways that we didn't do it because I would have been kind of a little steep driveway to pull it off, but it would have worked. I mean, it could have been done as long as you didn't have a Ferrari, you'd be good. So, and when we got into it, there was some confusion over where apparently 0 was. And working with city codes, I know it can be confusing. Bouncing around Muni code, it can make your head spin. And the determination was made that 0 was lower than where it actually was, because what I did was they averaged out where 0 was from all 4 corners of the house, which would put 0 down about 4 feet lower, maybe 4 or 5 feet lower than what was originally planned. Well, because part of this house is in a stream buffer, civil engineering had to be approved by the city to even build into the stream buffer. Have you built in a stream buffer before?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
I avoided them all costs.
Yeah, so I bought the lot where that was already done, so I didn't have to do it, but you know what I'm talking about. So the engineering now all of a sudden, so because 0 was the average of all 4 points, 0 of course for everyone just meaning ground level of the house, where they measure how tall the house is. The house was now too tall. So it's like, wait a minute, if the house is more than 35 feet tall, then obviously that doesn't meet the zoning code. So we had to change it because to redo it, and the civil engineer was like, he basically wanted to redo everything, and I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. It's insane. We're not going to start over. So we got into it, and so this house got redesigned from a 3-story, 4-bedroom, 3-bath with a 1-car garage to a 2-story, to a 2-story 4-3 with no garage. So we started building. Okay, great. So now we're constructing, and the builder, unfortunately, his tenure here was relatively short-lived. He built the house, when he started framing, we were 18 inches too high.
Wow.
Small oops. There were some things that happened that just were like, that's not what's on the paper. But the gist of it all was, it's 18 inches too high. So now it's like, well, that changes things. Okay, because now I've got this ginormous crawl space. And long story short, the framers were not exactly the most attentive to detail. And the builder wasn't really checking them. I mean, he was more of a
project manager.
Yeah, barely. So we let him go. But whenever we let somebody go, guess who's now in charge?
You are.
I am. So now all of a sudden I'm learning Morse code. But, we don't believe in cutting corners. So we're like, all right, whatever we got to do to learn to make it right, we're going to do it. So we had to correct some things in the framing and so forth. And we had to deal with some things in the roof and all. And so we got it all sorted out. Took some time, but we got it sorted out. And so we were feeling good. And one day we walked downstairs and it was like, or we were just, where the door is down there was just an opening. And so you looked inside and you're like, this is a ginormous crawl space. Maybe we can finish it. Because, hey, that was in the original plan. So we took it, so I brought in a separate architect and they drew me up what you see down there now with some changes, but more or less what's down there. And we drew it up and just said to the city, hey, we know that zero, because remember, we're still thinking zeros down here. Hey, this is going to be here, so it'll be about 4 feet below, whatever. So we're not really adding, we're just making the use of the space. Is that cool? And they were like, no, well, the zero's not down there. So what do you mean zero's not down there? Like that was like the whole reason we changed the whole house. No, I don't know. Zero is measured from the front 2 points. They didn't consider the back 2. So we were never too high. The original plan would have worked.
Wow.
Yes, major wow.
So I guess the moral of the story is maybe double check with the city or somebody to make sure that you don't have to change those plans. Because I have a very similar story that's similar to that, but we didn't check with the city. We just assumed without doing a little bit more due diligence and asking a few more questions.
Well, and I'll tell you how it happened. To lead into how it happened, long story short, they had no problem approving the basement. The final plan, zero, is actually the front height. So the house is 20-something odd feet tall. But it's frustrating because you think, how many months did we lose? Redesign, change this, and of course it changes the engineering a little bit, and this, and that, and the other, and so many changes happened that didn't have to happen. And then of course the holding costs, it's painful to think about. But how did it ultimately happen? Well, we hire architects, and rule number 1, new construction is, what's the survey? Rule number 2, see rule number 1. Rule number 3, what's the zoning code? Rule number 4, see rules 1 and 3. And until you've got all that covered, don't be like dreaming too much. You better know that you gotta have the survey, and you better know what the zoning code is. So we trusted architects to do that. This is a few years ago. So I've since learned, I've actually marveled how different designers, drafters, architects, whichever title you want to give them, don't give that piece the diligence it needs. I had one designer, they submitted a set of plans. They didn't check the zoning code. Now, I trusted them to do it, so I didn't worry about it. And and to their credit, they called me and apologized. Of course, it didn't save me on holding costs.
Yeah.
But they apologized because the city told them their design was too big for what the zoning allowed by like 500 square feet.
Wow.
And I sat there and I thought to myself, well, at least they're apologizing. So, hey, you got to give credit where credit's due. No point in getting too upset because it's done.
Nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do. So, I tell investors now, if you're going to do larger construction projects or new, either one, take the time to read the zoning code. It's really not super complicated, and the people in our case, City of Atlanta, they're actually pretty good at helping you navigate what you need to know.
They are.
They actually are.
Yeah,
the hardest part is just getting them on the phone.
That's the hardest
But
part.
once you get them, they're generally pretty helpful by and large, and get to know them, get to know some of the directors there, and they don't. I don't talk to some of those guys and feel like they want us to fail.
No.
I feel like, but they got a job to do. I get it, and they just, to them, you do have to meet the check boxes, and they do go back, and it's maybe not a glorious fun part of the job, but it's a critical one.
So just wrapping up some little tidbits, and this is, I know you can probably relate to this. If you're getting into new construction or just construction in general, your team is very important. So make sure you vet your surveyors and your engineers and your architects, because they're all not created the same. Make sure that, and even though somebody might do something in Henry County, that doesn't mean they can do something in Atlanta or DeKalb, because every county and every municipality is different. So you want to make sure that that person has done work in those areas and they know what they're doing. And a lot of times, if you have a good surveyor, they probably know a good architect, or a good architect may know a good surveyor. So ask for referrals. Before COVID, you could go down and talk to the city and maybe get some stuff done and sit and have some meetings and get a lot of your questions answered. It's a little, like you said, it's a little bit more challenging now to do some of that stuff. But make sure you're getting good subs, because it's better to pay a little bit more money for a better architect and a better surveyor up front, or pay a whole lot more later. With that being said, Frank, I appreciate you having me come interview you just to talk real estate a little bit.
Sure.
We're gonna do some B-rolls and show you guys this house. Until next time, guys, I'm GenoJ and I'm a real estate guru. Y'all make sure y'all hit that like button and y'all make sure y'all hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, guys, we are out.